Hello and welcome. This is Jennifer. So there's a little bit of a story to this video. I needed to make a bunch of teacher cards for Teacher Appreciation Week, which was a while back. I decided to go ahead and film the process in case I had something novel along the way to share with you. After doing the video, I decided I wasn't going to share it. I share some tips and tools that work when mass producing, but I decided not to share the video. Well, then yesterday, with everything happening in the news, I was struggling and still am, like many of you are, heartbroken and really unsure what to do. So I decided to finish off this video as a sign of appreciation to teachers and school staff and all those that really do a lot to protect our kids. So I'm finishing up this video and I'm hoping that you will do the same. Make some cards to share with your local school, your kids' teachers, somebody you may know, a retired teacher, someone, and let them know we're thinking of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the video. These are mass-produced teacher cards, but I have some tools and tips that I think may be helpful and hopefully inspiring. All of these cards were made using a great new stamp set from Altenew called Educator's Rule, and it has these great layering apple images, but also layering pencil images, which I'll be focusing on today. You'll also see in this video that those pencil images can be used for non-teacher cards too, so I made lots, even extras, to use for other things. I also like that the set includes the word principal, teacher, and can be used for staff also. So my plan is to make a bunch of one-layer cards. All of these cards will have the same design, but I can change up the colors of the pencils and the sentiments I used. To make sure that I get good placement of the pencils and the sentiments, I will create a guide or a template to follow. And in this template, I will get all the spacing just right so that when I go to make the cards, it'll be easy to do. So I'm going to share with you the process I went through to create the template, and you'll see some tips as I do so. I start with a piece of cardstock. This is just scrap cardstock, cut to the same size as I plan to make my cards, which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm also using my MISTI stamping tool. I highly recommend having a stamping tool like this. It's very helpful when doing mass producing. I'm starting by stamping my sentiment, getting the placement for my sentiment just right, which is the bottom right corner. I can change up the sentiment, but having something there as a holding position is helpful. I will then use a T-ruler, which is one of my most used tools in my craft room, and I'll use this to draw a pencil line at the left edge and the right edge of our sentiment. These marks will be guides for where we put our stamped pencils. So I'm starting with our stamp, one of the pencil stamps, right up against that left guide. I think it's best when wanting to stamp several images in a row to stamp the left image, then the right image, and then place the others between. So this is the leftmost image. Along the top and the bottom of that image, I'll do another pencil line. This will be so I can make sure that all of our pencils are lined up straight. Now, I will tell you that I am a perfectionist about these things. You could totally eyeball this and not worry about it at all. You could stagger the pencils so you don't have to worry about them being straight. But if you're looking for coming up with a design that's evenly spaced out, that you can use over and over again, this is how I go about that process. So we have our left pencil stamped, our right pencil stamped. Now we can add some in between. I thought I would take this opportunity to show you a few different ways to find a center point. I'm a math geek and I like to use rulers and measurements, but I know not everyone's that way. We all have minds that work a little differently. So I wanted to show you a few ways to find the middle point between those two pencils so you can get the spacing of your other pencils just right. Again, you could eyeball it if you prefer. If you are savvy with a ruler, you can measure the distance between these two pencils and make a mark at the halfway point. That's where your middle pencil image can go. By the way, if you struggle with the little increments on a ruler, one of my blog readers suggested the Victor ruler. It's very easy to read the numbers associated with each of the little increments on the ruler. So you can see it marks the 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch. You've got 7/16. I mean, really breaks it down all the way down to the 16ths of an inch. It also has the centimeters on the other side. This is helpful if you're trying to follow along with instructions that you may see a crafter do, because it really makes it easy to read. So if you struggle with measurement readings, this may be helpful to you. Now, using this ruler, you still have to do some math. You have to find the distance between those two pencil lines, then divide that by 2, and that's the midpoint. But let's be honest, who wants to think when they're crafting, right? There is an easier way to find that midpoint anytime instead of measuring. What I do is I take a piece of scrap cardstock and I put one end of the cardstock along the first edge, and then I put a pencil mark at the second line, and then I cut that in half. So this piece is the same as the width between those two pencil lines, right? I just fold this in half, making the two ends meet together. And where that fold in the middle is the halfway point. This is super easy, saves the frustration of finding a midpoint. And now all I have to do is put a little mark there where that fold line is in the center and use my T-ruler to draw a line there. Or you can use the midpoint to make 2 marks and connect those 2 marks with a regular ruler. I do find the T-ruler is helpful because you put it right against the edge and you know you have a straight edge, but any ruler would work. And now you have that midpoint line between those 2 pencil lines. And right on that midpoint line, I'm putting our next pencil image, and I'll just stamp that quickly. Again, this is just our template or guide to follow. It doesn't have to look pretty. Now the last 2 pencils will go between the others. This time I'm just eyeballing it. Again, this is a preference. Some people are happy with eyeballing it, make them kind of staggered. It doesn't matter. But if you're looking to get measurements just right, I'm hoping some of those tips helped. So this template or guide is ready now. I can use this to make sure my stamps are lined up when we stamp all of the cards. So I'm using the guide to line up the first pencil, the one on the left. I'm going to do rainbow order on most of them, but I will change it up on some. On some of them, I'll do our school colors. So I'm lining up the pencil with the one we stamped on our guide. I can be sure this is straight and spaced out just right because we did the template. From here on out, it's smooth sailing. So I have a bunch of top folding note cards, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'll put the first into the corner of my stamping tool, and I will stamp this pencil in red. These are the 2 colors of red I'll be using on my red pencils. I'll show you the other color combinations as we go. I'm using the lighter of the 2 colors, and that's the ruby red, and I'll stamp that. Now, I will tell you, you can use whatever inks you want. In fact, you could use the same ink pad for all of the layers of your stamping, which I'll talk about in a moment. But for here, I'm starting with my red ink, stamping that pencil on a bunch of note cards. I want to make as many as I can for teachers and for other occasions. Again, these don't have to be just teacher cards. Now, once I've stamped the red on all of those cards, I'm going to move over to the right and stamp this one with blue. I'm doing this in rainbow order, so at the end I'll have this blue color combination. You can do a screenshot if you want to use the same colors I used of Altenew ink, but again, use what you have. You can use absolutely any inks for this. You'll notice that some of my inks I'll double stamp. That is because I'm lazy and haven't re-inked them lately. If you re-ink your ink pads often, you don't have to worry about double stamping to get a crisp image. Okay, so after I did the blue on all of the cards, I'm going to go to that middle one. I don't know why. You can go in order if you want to, but I am just going to that middle one, lining it up with our guide, and then I will stamp this in yellow. The image I am stamping on all of these right now is the bottommost or solid first layer of the pencil, so I'm stamping it in the lighter of my colors. The next layer will be slightly darker. So I'm doing the yellow on these middle pencils, and you don't see them here, but I am stamping some in other colors too. Now at this point, I'm doing a lot of stamping, right? So I decided to use a tool that I haven't used in videos before, but I have off screen, and that is an ink pad holder. This is an inexpensive tool from We Are Memory Keepers. Now I'll be honest, it is not 100% effective, but I'd say it's like 95% effective. You just stick this to the bottom of your ink pad and it'll hold it so that you can easily hold your ink pad as you stamp. If you have trouble with your hands, arthritis, or something else, this may be helpful to you. When you're stamping a lot like I'm doing here, having this on the base of our ink pad is really helpful because it's easier on your fingers. You just squeeze it onto the base of your ink pad and it holds there. Again, about 95% effective, and then you can stamp much quicker because it's easier to hold. Now, the reason I say 95% effective, which is just kind of a number I pulled out of thin air, is because once or twice in creating all of these cards, the ink pad fell off the little ink pad holder. You just want to make sure you press it on firmly. You don't have anything on the base of your ink pad. It's just suctioning there. So you want to make sure you really press it in place. So I'm using that from here on out, and I found it really helped my hand because I was doing so much stamping. After stamping the first layer of the pencil barrels, I guess, I'm moving on to the pencil tip. When doing layered stamping, I like to give the first layer some time to dry so that our images stay crisp. So here I'm just giving that all that colorful stamping some time to dry as we do the pencil tips. Now I can come in with the second layer of the pencil barrels. They're very easy to line up with the first ones, and this one I will stamp in the darker shade. If you do not have a darker shade, you could double or triple stamp with your original color ink, and that'll make it darker. So you could use red ink for the pencil barrel for the first layer, and then stamp the same red ink 2 or 3 times for the second layer, which will result in a darker image. Now I did this for all of the pencils, and you can see how they're starting to look more realistic, like they have some dimension to them. All right, after doing the center of the pencils or the barrel and the tips, we can do that metal piece at the top and the eraser. The metal piece I'm doing with Hero Art's soft granite ink, and I continued from there to stamp all the layers of the pencils, just going from card to card, getting the stamping done. Now, I'm not going to show you all the layers of the pencil stamping. It's very easy to follow the guide. Once you get your placement right, you just do the stamping. And look at all of these cards we made. 1-layer cards that will be easy to give or mail. I did pink ink for the erasers, gray for the metal part, and the colorful tips on the pencils. All right, now it's time to step those pencils up. I love when pencils are engraved on the side, so I thought we'd do some small sentiments on each of the pencils to make them even more special. I used my favorite stamp set for small sentiments, and that's the Altenew Flower Vine stamp set. This is an oldie but goodie. I use it a lot in videos. And in here are several sentiments that would work great on the side of these pencils. Some of them I cut smaller to be shorter sentiments, but they all worked great. So now I'm lining up the first sentiment on the side of the first pencil. Sorry to get my head in the way there. And I will stamp that with black ink. And I'll do so on all of the cards. Since I stamped the pencil in the same place on all the cards, I can just move from one card to the next, adding the sentiment. Now there are ways to stamp one image and then shift it a bit in your stamping tool and then stamp again and shift again to get placement just right for all of these. But to be honest with you, I think it's easier to get the placement just right in the corner of the stamping tool each time. That way you can make sure all of your cards are stamped nicely. So now I'm in with my second sentiment, and I'm stamping that on the second pencil. This is pretty quick to do because if you line it up with the first, it'll be lined up on all of them. Now for those sentiments on the bottom right corner. I used the teacher word on some, but I wanted them to all be a little bit differently. Some of them are for school staff, so teacher wouldn't really work, and some are going to go to other folks. So I dug through my stamp sets and found any kind of thank you sentiment that would fit underneath those pencils and keep the design about the same. Because I made so many of these pencil cards, I can use a lot of different sentiments under here. It always feels good to use more of what you have. Now, if you want to make sure your placement is just right and you get the sentiment straight, I do recommend the Ink Blot Shop A2 alignment guides. There are different versions. They have like engraved lines on these and they're see-through. So you can make sure that your sentiment is straight before stamping it. So I stamped a sentiment on all of these cards. I want to show you all the different cards that I did, and then I'll show you what I did with the mess-ups too. It's a little variation on this design. So here are all of my cards that I ended up with. And I know some of you don't like to mass produce, but it's times like this that I think mass producing can be good because it means more cards to give to people who need encouragement, such as teachers and school staff. So you can see all of them have pencils on the top right, the same sentiments on the side, but I did change the sentiment I put along the bottom just so I would have different occasions. Some of these will go to teachers, school staff, principals, so on. But some of these will often also go to fellow crafters who, let's face it, love colored pencils too. Some of these are stamped in colors that would work for just anyone. These I stamped in my kids' school colors so that I could make it a little more personal for those teachers. But they all have the stamping on the side of the pencils and the same basic design. Now, I know some of you don't have kids out there, and I know some of you don't know teachers personally. But that doesn't mean you can't encourage your local school's teachers. Just drop them off at the front desk of your local school. One time there was something bad that happened at a school near me. I didn't know any of the teachers or students, but a bunch of my friends and I collected cards and dropped off cards for all of the teachers and donuts. And I'm hoping that encouraged them. I think these teachers really could use our encouragement. So I have lots of cards here, and I hope it inspires you. Because I don't know about you, but I feel helpless sometimes, and this is just a way to feel like I'm making a difference. We're all just trying our best here. So I will say, as I made these cards, I messed a few of them up where I got a fingerprint or I messed up the stamping. Instead of starting over, I kept those mess ups and used the coordinating die for the pencil to cut the good pencils out and use them for layering on a few additional cards. So no one will ever know that these cards were created because I messed up my one layer versions. And the funny thing is, I actually like this card and plan to make more of it. So I have my pencils going in a different direction here. And then on top of that, I have a layered thanks die cut sentiment from Simon Says Stamp. And I had 3 extra pencils after that, so I did another card design where I put 3 pencils along the bottom. Instead of making sure they were all lined up, I staggered them, which made it a lot easier. And then I did a thanks sentiment above it. I appreciate you sticking with me through this video, especially as I struggled with my words. I will link here at the end to a couple other videos. One is about using crafting as therapy, and one is about mass producing cards. If you're interested in the supplies I use, those are linked below in my YouTube description. I thank you for taking this time to watch. Sending you all lots of hugs, and please stay safe.